Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Jeremy and I'm the founder of Listen and Learn Research. If you haven't come across us before, we've got a really simple mission. We just want to help people make better decisions. And we think that great insight is something that really should light up and inspire a room. You know, you have those meetings and you're talking about new things and someone brings in a new bit of research or a bit of insight and everyone goes, that's the thing that we should be doing. Well, that's what we're all about. Today's session is going to be talking about TikTok, which is something I've grown to love over the last sort of year or so as I've got to understand it a bit more. And maybe like many of you, I came to TikTok with a sort of feeling that it's not for me. I've seen people in the street doing weird dances and filming themselves, and I thought, it's just that. But a number of things have changed over the last year, which made me really reconsider it. And actually, I think it's one of those things which is often misunderstood and overlooked. I'm going to talk a bit today about TikTok, in particular around how to use it and think of TikTok as a source of consumer insight. What I mean by that is, how can we understand the people that matter to us, our customers, better by using TikTok as a source of observing what's important to them in their lives. Now, I'll start with a story which may be familiar to a bunch of you, but one of our dear teammates, Sky, has got a teenage daughter who recently came back from college. And I don't know, like you, if you have teenage children, they're lying on the sofa, flopping all day, looking at their phone is pretty much the sole interaction that you're going to get. And I remember Sky is telling us about how her daughter had wanted these jeans, had been saving up for these jeans for many, many weeks and months and trying to really sort of put all of her spare cash into this. It was an expense that her mum thought was just a crazy amount of money to spend. And then one morning, Sky comes down to see her daughter on the phone in what she would consider to be completely ruined jeans. They're bleached completely. They look ridiculous. And to Sky's slightly horrified perspective, she's going, what have you done? What have you done? Why have you ruined these expensive jeans that we took ages saving up for and trying to bind? And completely nonplussed, the daughter just refers back to her, look, Mum, it's nothing. It's just something I saw on TikTok. TikTok is one of those things that has crazy levels of influence on people. And we'll get onto that in a second. But one thing I noticed interestingly recently was a GWI report that said 1 in 4 boomers had got TikTok. It's changing, it's developing, it's becoming something that we need to get our head around. We need to use it. Ask yourself, have you ever used TikTok? You may have done, you may not do. I don't know who's coming into this call today. But if you do spend some time with it, you'll see the appeal. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. There are lots of really super interesting bits on TikTok, depending on what your interest is. There's stuff there for everyone. I like random stuff. I'm particularly enjoying comedy clips from the 90s. So when I was growing up and I was 16, 17, 18, all the comedy that was so important to me and my friends is now being repackaged and put up in TikTok-sized morsels. And it's fun, right? When I'm waiting for my kids to get ready after swimming or get changed or any of the other nonsense parts where you've got 5 minutes for a bit of fun. It's short, it's digestible, it's bite-sized fun, it's really engaging. But it's also more important than that. And that's why we're here. Because this fun, this engagement, this level of excitement around it means that it's actually incredibly influential. And it's something that I think so far the research community has overlooked and misunderstood. The plan today is to share some initial work that we've done around trying to help organizations create insight from TikToks. That meeting that you're having where you share a new insight and someone goes, I know what to do about that now. That's great. For us, I think it's incredibly exciting, but it is right now, we're at the beginning of a much longer journey. What I'd like to do today is just sort of like grab your attention a little bit, make you sit up and think, okay, this is something that we need to take seriously. I want you to think more about it and to start thinking about how you can help your business learn more about the people that are important to you by using TikTok as a source for that. Crazy chart. It's quite hard at the moment to sort of really get under the skin of cause and effect with TikTok because there's no really API and the metrics are quite fuzzy around it. But we did some digging around it because we're kind of interested. And there's one example that I saw, and it started with a stat that I'd heard, which was the market share for CeraVe recently increased by hundreds of millions of dollars, which is kind of interesting. So I was trying to work out, okay, where's that come from? And if I look across other metrics, and what we can see here is actually CeraVe is the blue and Neutrogena is the red. So Neutrogena mentions in the UK are pretty flatlined across the period. They haven't really done a huge amount. But what we do see is a massive, massive spike of interest in mentions. And this is Google searches for this brand called CeraVe. And this is all about skincare. And so what's happened is this massive increase in Google search not social, not TikTok, in Google. Where's that come from? And okay, we're not seeing like CeraVe's blasted on billboards everywhere or massive TV campaigns or poster adverts. What we did see is a load of activity on social channels, particularly around the visual elements. So I'm talking about YouTube and how that then is then magnified and taken and spread through TikTok. We didn't see it in text form. This is a very visual, though social kind of event. But what we did see is a group of beauty influencers had really started talking about and recommending CeraVe on TikTok. And so this is, we believe, is really the goal between how this market share increased, how the search volumes increased, what really sort of spurred and created this excitement around the brand. And back when we looked at this data, Neutrogena was around 80 million views on TikTok. CeraVe was over 800 million. So it shows the power. The point of this is that TikTok, from a way of stimulating and creating demand within a category, simply works. We don't have all the maths, but we can work it out. We can see the effect that is happening. People see content that they like, which translates into new purchase behaviors and new choices. There's this illusion that TikTok is just about dance videos, so it's therefore something for teenage girls and can just be ignored. But that's a mistake. It's so varied, it's so widespread. There's just so much of life that's captured on TikTok. For example, if we look at hashtag Sunday mornings, you've got people just sharing their routines with each other, what they get up to and why and what's important. People highlighting the choices that they've made and what's important to them. You've got Witch Talk, where digital witches have created an online tribe where they can get together and share witchy tips. You've got Migraine, where people talk about what it's like to suffer migraines, darker, more sort of like intense sort of TikTok. So just don't think that it's all light and fluffy. There are lots of different types of conversation happening. We're doing some work at the moment around book talk because I really want to understand this whole phenomena and what it is that's taken this kind of the young adult book category by storm. And then there's my favorite, potato talk. Sounds a bit inane, but I love potatoes. I love finding different ways of cooking potatoes. And there's a whole TikTok hashtag just around delicious carb-based delights. The final thing here is around TikTok is that people are using TikTok to build their resumes. They're using it as a way of applying for jobs. Don't dismiss TikTok as one thing that you may have heard or you've seen one person use. It is enormous. It is everywhere. Lots of people are using it for lots of different areas. So what can we do to help use TikTok to understand people? Well, as I said, TikTok is incredibly powerful. And those brands without a TikTok strategy right now are going to be missing out on its power to influence their target audience. And as researchers that help and support people in the business from a creative, a strategic, a communications, a marketing point of view, if we're not analyzing TikToks, then we're missing out on the opportunity to find out what really matters to people and how to engage with them. So why do I say it's so powerful? I think there are a number of reasons. For consumers, it's a really engaging way of them finding out new things. They can follow their interests, they can feel part of a different tribe, they can have a laugh, they can cry, they can share what's going on, they can create and share their own content, they can comment on others, and they can create feeds that work for them and entertain them. For researchers, on the other hand, I think it's about getting closer to the action. And if we think about it, when we use surveys or focus groups to ask people about their experiences and their actions, there's a bit of a lag, and that lag can be minutes or it can be hours. It's usually quite long. And we're asking them well after the event why they did things, how they remember they felt, and the decisions that they made. The alternative is we can observe things happening in the moment. And I think TikTok is much more like that. If we remember back to Jurassic Park when they've got the mosquito and the amber, it's a moment captured in time. And that's the value, because nothing gets in between the expression, the action, the behavior, and our ability to observe that and then learn from that. It's not being post hoc rationalized. It's not being forgotten. It's not being misinterpreted. It's raw and it's captured in that moment. And TikTok, because of the volume and because of the immediacy, because of the interaction, because of the richness of the data, gives us so much to work with. It's really just a different way of thinking about where and how we develop our understanding of consumers and the choices that they make. So obviously, you're all convinced now that TikTok is the primary source of any sort of research that you want to do. So why aren't more people doing more research like us? Well, there are a couple of barriers. The first of this is that it is an emerging platform. It's grown incredibly quickly, but it doesn't have the tools and the systems and the metrics and the analysis and the ability to get at the data in the way that some of the other platforms do. Also, because of the misconceptions around it, people who are commissioning research might not see it as a valid tool. And so we need to educate people around the depth and breadth of things that are happening on TikTok and its sheer commercial power. It's a massive demand generator. There's also this knowledge gap within our industry. And frankly, if you haven't used TikTok, you've got no idea of what it's capable of. Immerse yourself, spend some time. And I'll recommend this to any social platform that you're using or thinking about or analyzing. You've got to know the platform to understand what's coming out of it. It's our job as researchers to inspire our colleagues, like really set them on fire with new ideas, okay, to make the best decisions that they possibly can. So surely I believe that we should be using every resource available to help our thinking. The second reason that it's a bit difficult to do research on TikTok is there's no meaningful API. Listening providers only really give you sort of like very, very top level hashtags, music trends, that kind of stuff. Up until recently, it's been very hard to get hold of historical or geographical data. And also there's the issue of what's been called a sort of algorithmic fog, which is the things that you look at, then TikTok takes as the things that you want to look at, so that you're never getting served a really pure form. They're starting to see some really good vendors coming into the space that are solving some of those challenges. But up until this point, it's always been tech is giving us a very light touch, very shallow way of doing it. However, the juice is definitely worth the squeeze. So how do we avoid missing out on what's important? I don't think it's right that something so powerful can remain so overlooked and misunderstood. So last year, I asked my team to develop a solution, and I'm incredibly proud of what they managed to achieve. We wanted to create an approach that can be adapted and replicated across projects, which was both meaningful and gave us deep qualitative insight, but also something that was rigorous and meaningful too, that gave us robust quantitative numbers, something that we could be sure of, that people will need. There's always this debate about numbers versus quality. You need both. You need to be able to tell a good story and back it up with data. So we chose a project and we looked at a number of different things. The one we chose was around immune health. The first thing was immune health is quite serious, and coming out of the pandemic is something that lots of people are talking about. It's an area with sort of emerging ideas about what's possible, what's not impossible. It's a blend of different voices. It's also serious. It's not the dancing videos that TikTok's known for. We've seen it as an area of interest that's grown over the years, and it really reflects this kind of shift in attitudes from moving away from reactive approach to healthcare. I'm sick, I'll get cured, to a much more proactive, which is I'll do the best that I can do to ensure my continued health. It's also interesting because of the range of advisors, different voices that are talking and taking part in TikTok, which shows the scope for consumers to be influenced by lots of different ways and lots of different voices. So how do we access data on TikTok? Well, I mentioned the lack of API. It does make it makes it harder. There's no doubt about it. It's when you've got text-based social data, the listening platforms can get that for you most of the time. This is much more challenging. One, in terms of just the nature of the content. You can pass words through some kind of like text-based analytics tool and get something. You can't, much harder to pass video through it and get any sort of sense of meaning. So you've got a collection issue, you've got a kind of an analysis issue, which means, to be honest, you've just got to get manual. And if you've heard me talk before, you know I'm a fan of manual analysis of this kind of data. As I said before, there are some vendors coming along that can really, really help. And we've started working with a number of those to deal with some of the technical issues. But that aside, you've still got to look at the TikToks. You've got to get in. We found that the desktop version was pretty clunky. So the smartphone one is the one. Get it on a stand, get some notes out. Yeah, it's really clunky. Okay, I understand that. We're at the beginning of understanding how to use social data in this way. So we're at a place where scrappy is better than nothing. Of course, it's going to get better as we refine and as the tech gets improved. Another question to think about before we sort of dive into the project is it right to access data on TikTok? Just because it's there, do we have the right to access it? Which is really a choice that you have to make for yourself within the organization that you're in. The question is, ethically, is it okay to research posts without people's knowledge? The data is arguably in the public domain, so you could go, it's there, I can access it. But you have to also appreciate that people haven't posted that with you in mind. They haven't created and shared their content with the express consent of giving it to researchers and marketers to monetize and to analyze. So you've got that kind of dichotomy between those two different points. So you need to form a point. So for us, social data is lacking this kind of ethics. So we've created our own guidelines. And this is sometimes the balance between how do we protect people's privacy while still being able to access the amazing data and observe stuff which is in the public domain. For this project, one of the lines that we drew was around shareability. We only looked at those the content which is shared with a hashtag. If you're creating TikToks and you're posting it and you're adding hashtags to it, it's because you want to be seen. It's because you want your content to be out there and to be viewed by other people. And for us, that formed a good ethical line. Again, you have to think about where you are as a business, what your purpose is, what your goals are, and to ensure that you're happy with that use of the data. Okay, I'm just going to go through some of the steps that we took to run this project. And like I said, look, it's an emerging technique. Happy to discuss what we've done. The first question, or the first place to start, is like with every good project, what's the problem? What's the challenge? What are we trying to overcome? Where are we going to end up? Who are we going to inspire? Let's frame the problem correctly. If we don't do this, it ends up being meaningless. It ends up being nice to have data. It's not going to set a meeting on fire. You're not going to look in your colleagues' eyes and see them excited about what they're going to do differently tomorrow. So like any project, you need to define your research question and check for feasibility. Are people actually talking about your topic on TikTok? They probably are, to be honest. And I think if I imagine myself as a potato farmer wanting to reach a new audience, I'd not need to go too far to find crazy new ways of marketing my potatoes to the TikTok universe. Issues are around how you think about how you sample as well. And again, if you're doing it all manually, you need to think about the fact that it's hard to sample by location. So you have to think about how else are you going to use those sort of demographic slants to get at the right data you want. You can use language, you can use subject, lots of different ways. And again, the vendors coming through are going to be able to help us with this. And then we want to think about, okay, how much data do we want to look at? So this is an internal piece which we're going to share just really to sort of showcase what TikTok can be done. So we decided that around 300 posts at random was a good place to start. With anything, the question is, how much data do you need? All comes down to how much data do you need to feel comfortable with in answering the question that you want to start. So that's setting it up, having a clear vision, knowing what data you're going to get, knowing how much you want to look at. And then it's really time to start immersing yourself in TikToks. There's no shortcut to this. You can't press a button and get insight from TikToks. I don't think you can press a button and get real proper insight on anything, but that's another story. What we do is we need to sort of start thinking about our topic. So let's take, so it was immune health. So we start by searching around keywords and hashtags that relate back to this in the app. And you start and you follow and you build and you see where these hashtags lead to. And you start building up this like idea, this sort of mind map of different ways that people are exploring and talking about this interest. You do it again, you snowball, you collect more and more and more, you iterate, you experiment. And then you've got a load of hashtags, which you can then rank and size and group and basically see what the shape of the conversation looks like. And with immune health, like most things, there's a big drop off after the top sort of set, this whole Pareto rule coming in. We found that the top 10 hashtags really were capturing most of the conversation around it because people want to be in the same tribe. They want to be in the same places. They want to be where everyone else is. So if you have established names, that's going to be where most of the conversation is going to be. So that's where we decided to focus our investigation. What we do now is you need to observe, you need to watch, we need to start getting into it. And so what we do is we start watching TikToks and make notes of the signals that we're picking up. And this is where call skills come in. That you can watch something and it can just go into your brain at one level. I watched that was fine. But if you think about this from a qualitative research kind of view, you watch it again, you watch it again, you watch it again, you watch it again. And every time you watch it, you're picking up different layers. How are they talking? What are they doing? What's your first impression? What's the language? What are they wearing? What are they listening? What's the context they're coming in? We need to think in 3D about this. It's not just the topic of the post, but it's who are they? Where are they? What else can we see? What else can we hear? Think about what content is irrelevant, what we want to get rid of, what's not meaningful to our question. What we then do is then use those signals, use those ideas to build a framework, which we can then use to systematically watch the rest of the data and interpret it. We keep watching, we use this code frame. What we're going to do then is, once we're watching it, we've got a set of clues to help us understand what's going on in the data. It helps us pick out what the most important signals are. It's manual, there's no shortcut. It's worth doing. Then it's around how do we learn from this? And because we've coded our data, we've quantified the meaning that we're seeing in the data in all of these kind of like quite nebulous content otherwise. And that helps us make sense of it. So we can look for patterns. We can see which ideas, which factors, which symbols, which codes, which bits of the conversation are talked about more frequently. That helps us understand the shape of the conversation. It can help us see what people are talking about. It can help us understand how they frame their narrative. It can help us understand the context that they're coming from. It can help us see their motivations for creating content. And then from all of that, our job is to bring it together and to try and understand where are the patterns, where are the groups of behaviors and attitudes and experiences that we can start coalescing and start thinking about. And it's those ideas that we can then use to start building the story and identifying areas for further qualitative analysis. And we go back to certain videos, just really immersing ourselves in the language or how they might frame it. I was talking to the team earlier on about our book talk project, and there's really interesting ideas here around self-expression and because it's young adults and the idea of flipping between young and adult and all those ideas, and they come to light by watching and observing the tensions as people express them through their TikToks. It's really about a sense of getting your head and to help you build your thinking about what's really going on and why. Then it's about bringing it together, thinking about how you're going to make an impact. And when it comes to reporting, it's around building stories out of the glimpses into people's lives that they're giving you on TikTok. You don't know a lot about that person, but hey, you know a lot about immune health because we've looked at loads and loads of videos about that. And from that, we understand how brands can use that to create a more meaningful sense of engagement or understanding of this audience. What we do is we use a sort of storytelling narrative to sharing insights. So when you're looking at the data, you go back to the challenge that you started with, you had at the beginning, you think about what you were trying to solve. You condense your work into 3 to 4 main key points that are going to help you solve that challenge. These are the different points of view that you want to get across. These are the 3 things. No one remembers more than 3 or 4 things from a meeting. Focus your mind, focus on these 3 or 4 things that you want your colleagues to feel really inspired by. Importantly, TikToks teach us not just about what works on TikTok, but what's important to people outside of it. I might have a headache and look at TikToks about migraine to help me understand how to cope with it. I may be watching Potato Talk and getting inspired by different ways of cooking Hasselback potatoes, but it was the supermarket or the online retailer that I'll turn to make it happen. Use what you learn about emerging trends to get ahead of consumer demand. What's on TikTok is not just about TikTok, it's about life. Of course, you may also want to think about bringing in other areas and triangulating what you found on TikTok with other analysis. As I started by saying, looking at Google Trends to see what was happening. Use trend data, use other social data, or use other primary research to explore the themes and test them in more detail. Last few slides now to wrap up. Just a few headlights. We're going to launch this report later on in the year, but a couple of things that we found out that I thought was super interesting. So one, within immune health on TikTok, it's not chemical, it's all about natural. And this idea of pursuing natural ingredients as a way of building immune health and making yourself fitter and stronger for the future. It also takes place within a holistic framework. So it's not just one thing, it's one of many, which is a proactive movement towards creating a better health for yourself. Another key finding was there are lots of audiences present in the data, including doctors, chefs, fitness and wellness influencers, parents, students, vegans, other diets. Lots of people jockeying around for influence and to share their point of view. But this also means that the landscape for consumers can be very confusing, and they're exposed to a large amount of medical advice that might be incorrect or at worst could be harmful. Which brings me on to a couple of watch outs really. The first one is really around misinformation on TikTok. And if we're thinking about how to use and the use of TikTok as a tool, misinformation is something we need to be really serious about, particularly when we're doing sort of healthcare or social research. And we asked ourselves this question as researchers: are we qualified properly to detect misinformation? How do we need to prepare ourselves? How do we get around it? Should we be reporting harmful information when we see it? And if so, who to? In the project that we did, what we decided to do is to flag every time someone gave medical advice but wasn't obviously having a medical background, and the numbers were quite alarming. The second thing to think about is really about ambiguity. And it's like having a consistent code frame that you've tested and you've worked with your colleagues to design is a good way of getting rid of this, but we need to be careful about the level of objectivity we could put onto our understanding of content that people have put out there. Are we being consistent in how we're understanding tone of voice? Are we really objective about what we say someone's intention is when posting? What you do and the measures that you use need to be clearly defined before you start. And coders should be in constant communication with each other to make sure they're getting a consistent view. That said, TikTok is fundamentally incredibly powerful. We've shown right at the beginning of the session that it can really be a huge demand generator. It's still very unknown. It's still lots of brands are trying to work out how they should engage with it. I think from a researcher's point of view, it's actually easier. We don't have to try and come up with the right content. Our job is instead to use TikTok as a source of data, as a primary source of qualitative and quantitative data, which we can use to help understand people better. Just like Sky's daughter with her bleached jeans, we know it can be hugely influential on real-world behaviors. It can shape people's behaviors, their attitudes, how they expect things, and their purchasing behavior. And as a research industry, it's time for us to start taking TikTok seriously. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your coming today. We're doing a few things. So at the end of today's session, we're going to post some links to some spotlights on different TikToks that we've been looking into over the last sort of few months. Also, as I mentioned, we've got a session coming up on BookTok, which is a huge phenomena that's been causing a huge storm within sort of the book and the publishing world. So we're publishing our findings on that later on in the year. Brilliant. If anything of that was interesting, if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation with us, that we're all about trying to help you guys make better decisions, and I'd love to have a chat. So thanks so much for your time. Look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thanks.